For nearly 200 years, almost every piece of classical music relied on a secret ingredient that most people to date have never even heard of: basso continuo. It shaped everything, and it was the backbone of music by all the greatest Baroque composers like Bach, Handel, Vivaldi. So, what is basso continuo? Let's find out. Okay, so what is the core definition of basso continuo, which is also called thoroughbass or figured bass, or often just continuo? So the core definition of basso continuo is a written out bass line with chords improvised above it. Now, how do we know what chords to improvise? What tells us that are something called figures. Figures give the harmony. But what are figures? What are figures in basso continuo? They are numbers written above or sometimes below the bass line that indicate what note to play above the bass, what notes to play above the bass. But they don't tell us what order to play the notes in. So figures give us what the harmony is, but they don't tell us the voicing. That would be the order in which you play those notes in the right hand. They just tell us what the notes are, what the harmony is. Now, not all pieces have figures. So even Baroque pieces that expect you to play basso continuo in them might not have any figures at all. Those pieces are called unfigured. And then many, if not even most pieces, most Baroque pieces, have most of the figures, but some are missing. So that would be what we call partially figured music. Now, by the way, if you want to learn how to play basso continuo, you can check out my guide. It's called How to Start Learning Basso Continuo in 3 Simple Steps. I'm going to link it right down below in the description, so check it out there. It's a great way to start learning if you're totally unfamiliar with this, or even if you're a little bit familiar with basso continuo, but you want to learn, how do I play this? How do I get started? What do I do? How do I read the figures? Check out that guide. Also, make sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel, where I put out a bunch of content about basso continuo and about the harpsichord and early music stuff in general. So, what are the origins and the history of basso continuo playing? So, basso continuo was invented around the 1570s, but it takes off and it really becomes codified with the invention of opera and monody, mono being one, a single vocal line in this case with accompaniment. That's a monody. Opera at this time is actually the same thing. So the invention of opera and monody right around the year 1600. This is actually what defines the beginning of the Baroque period, the invention of opera. And so this is when basso continuo takes off. Now, the first person to use the term, so basso continuo existed back starting in the 1570s, but the first person to use the term was Lodovico Viadana in a publication. It was printed in the title of his publication in 1602, Cento Ecclesiastici Concerti, I believe is the title, 100 Sacred Concertos. So it was vocal pieces, vocal concertos we're talking about here, vocal pieces with accompaniment. That is the first time the term basso continuo was used. But, as we just saw, basso continuo, the practice predates the term. Even figures were being used by these opera composers a few years before Viadana used the term and talked about basso continuo playing in his collection of music. Now, basso continuo, though, was used in essentially all ensemble music during the entire Baroque period. So that was the beginnings, right around 1600, when it starts to get codified. But it's used for the next 150 plus, as we'll see, years, the entire Baroque period. It's also used into the classical period. So even several of Beethoven's piano concerti contain continuo figures in the solo part when the orchestral tutti are playing. So you'll see in those pieces that Beethoven writes in basso continuo figures into the piano part so that the piano can play along in the orchestral tutti using basso continuo. That's pretty amazing. Even the Emperor Concerto, Beethoven's 5th piano concerto, has basso continuo figures in it. That's so crazy to me. So basso continuo was invented in Italy, but it quickly spread to the rest of Europe. national styles developed. So different countries in Europe had slightly different styles, or sometimes more than slightly, different styles of basso continuo playing. This was very much in line with the national styles that existed for music playing in general. So for example, Italy had a very different way of approaching classical music, and what their music, what they wrote and what it sounded like was quite different from what Baroque music in France sounded like. For example, Italy and France, the most separate, but all the countries of Europe had quite their own flavor of how to write Baroque music. And that was true for basso continuo as well. Okay, so what instruments played basso continuo? Almost always it was played by more than one instrument. So it was one line of music, a bass line, usually with figures, but it was played by more than one instrument, almost always. Usually it was one chordal instrument, so an instrument that played chords like the harpsichord, the organ, the clavichord, probably too quiet, but the theorbo, so the big bass lute, harp, even Baroque guitar. All of those instruments would be chordal instruments that could be used to play basso continuo. So they would play the bass line in the left hand and then chords in the right hand. And then in addition to one of those, or more than one of those instruments, you usually also had an instrument that just played the bass line. So examples of this would be a viola da gamba, a cello, sometimes even a bassoon, a wind instrument. If you had several instruments that were just playing the bass line that weren't chordal instruments, in addition to your chordal instruments, you might also have a bigger bass instrument, so like what we now think of as a double bass. Various versions and varieties of that called the violone in the Baroque period. So you usually have one chordal instrument at least and one bassline instrument at least, playing basso continuo, all reading the same single musical line. Now, you can have one instrument in some cases, so some songs are just intended for voice and lute. Some pieces can be played just with an instrument or voice and harpsichord, but almost always it's this combination of two or more instruments. That's true for chamber ensembles, small ensembles, and big orchestral works in the Baroque as well. They all play from the same bass line. The chordal instruments all play realize it's called the figures. They improvise chords based on the harmonies given in the figures. And then the bassline instruments, the bassline only instruments, just play the bassline. But you could have 5 or even 10 continuo instruments all playing that same line and improvising chords over it, playing the bassline together, even for chamber music and definitely for large orchestral pieces with basso continuo. The combinations that you would use, would you put a harpsichord with a cello, harpsichord with a viola da gamba, or would you have a bunch of instruments playing a bunch of things? So viola da gamba, harpsichord, organ, theorbo, or arch lute is another option. All of those could play together, but what combinations depended on where you were, what time period you were in, and what the music really called for and really needed. So, how is basso continuo actually played? It is not all 4-part harmony all the time. That's a way, if the term basso continuo comes up in a music theory course that you might have taken, or you might have looked it up online, people often talk about figured bass, or basso continuo, as 4-part harmony all the time, following the rules of voice leaning. This is not true for real basso continuo playing. So real basso continuo playing does follow the voice leading rules, the ones that are laid out best and most clearly by Johann Joseph Fuchs in his treatise Gradus ad Parnassum. That's a Baroque treatise looking back to Palestrina and that type of Renaissance music. But that's where we get most of our voice leading rules. Basso continuo playing in the Baroque does follow those rules, but there's a little bit more flexibility than this 4-part strict harmony regarding how many voices you play at one time and why you might change them. So you might change them to create or reduce emphasis somewhere, to create dynamics in your basso continuo playing, to create different types of styles or different types of characters. You have more flexibility of changing the number of voices, of notes, changing the number of notes you play in your chords than you would in strict 4-part counterpoint. Basso continuo is a As all of that points to, basso continuo is a super nuanced art form. There's a lot that goes into it. So this is just the brief, super brief Reader's Digest overview of the meaning of basso continuo, the definition of basso continuo. But basso continuo, the art, super complex. Really cool, actually, because it's very flexible. It allows for so many changes on the fly, in the moment, that aren't possible with written out music. So once again, basso continuo, a bass line with figures. The bass line exists on the page, but the figures, the harmonies, are improvised. The harmonies are given, but what notes and what order and how you play them with what style, that's all improvised and improvised art. So now you know the definition of basso continuo. If you like this video, please subscribe to my channel and hit that little notification bell so you get notified every time I put out a new video. And if you found this video helpful, please give it a like and leave me a comment below. Leave me a comment below. I would love to answer your questions. I would love to know what you want to know, what you need to know about basso continuo. So just leave me a comment. Let me know. Does this make sense? Any more questions? Ask me what you want about basso continuo. See you guys later.